to our Benwick Council, John Sid. So for quite some time, our real estate committee, our board chair, we've been discussing a way that Benwick may begin participating once again with an equitable process in both the city or the county auctions, one or both. So John is actually going to walk us through some of his work that he is conducting for some of the other land banks and our New York Land Bank Association. So I guess we'll start first with a roll call and sign in, which I believe has already been completed. And I'll, of course, turn it over to our board chair.
So if we're gonna go through the action items first, do we want to hit John then, or leave John towards later in the presentation?
We're gonna go to John as soon as we complete resolution 4, or number 4, resolution 2025-4.
So skip to the treasurer's report and then resolution.
Mhm.
So why don't we?
So we'll be talking about the item 2.
We're going to.
Okay.
We'll hit item 2 after. We'll hit items 3, 4, go back to 2. So let's going out of order a little bit. Treasurer's report for March through June 2025.
Okay, everybody in their package, essentially the package consists today really only of 4 months of treasurer's reports. Also, a week ago, we did send out a copy to all board members. What you can see, if you refer to the slide above, we did send a comprehensive reporting of our Q2 RPTL report. We also have a hard copy. Nadine, the city copy is next to you if you'd like to go through it. The hard copy for the county that can be passed around, but you'll see every ARP invoice of costs, all the M&T and Benwick statement, bank statements, our pay apps to BCC, along with the wire transfers for the month of April, May, June. Benwick payment summary and our vendor invoices. So that's information that is due as part of our agreement. Thank you, Alexis, who does that work. And she also distributes those reports to Ray Noseworthy on the Benwick board. And also Monica receives this things. So wanted to make sure the board got that complete copy last week of everything so they could review that along with our Benwick Treasury reports. So on our first page, March 2025, Benwick balance of $6,309,213.97. We just turned the page to April. There is a Benwick balance of $20,371,739. Exactly, interesting. So that would reflect our that we had received the ARP money from both the city and the county. May Treasury report balance on the third page of $19,267,671.96, and June at $17,726,390.54. So that's 4 months of essentially expenses on all of our. This is all standard work on our LBI rehabs, on our ARP work, on our Adams Street projects. We do have all of the different checking accounts and treasury bills all designated separately at the bottom of each monthly page. So a lot of financial information was distributed this month. We're certainly open to answering any questions and interest with regard to any of these reports. So if there's any comment or questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions, comments? Their pleasure of the board.
Adam, our treasurer, is not here today, unfortunately. But Adam's been helping us with all of these, numerous bills. I mean, the bill paying has obviously gotten a lot of activity increase. So thank you to Adam McNeil for that.
I'll make a motion to approve. March through June.
And so there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Nadine. Motion made and seconded. Anything on the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is approved. So resolution 2025-4. Justin.
So you can, I think looking up on the screen and then also the very last page of your package would have the resolution. We do have a disposition plan for today. This is a Beautiful property. It's also the property that we're going to be meeting at on our tour next Friday at 10 a.m. If anybody would like a chance to get to go through this home. This is 249 East Street in the city of Buffalo in the Black Rock neighborhood. Single family home, very large, very historic property, 3,057 square feet. 5 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, structure built around 1890. And the entire rehab was funded by the New York State HCR LBI grant. Matt, if you could go to the next slide, it's give you, yeah, please. That'd be a little easier to see. We have just for you to take a look at, you can see there's a historic photograph of that home from 1940, and you can see there's a beautiful porch. And then in 2023, when Benlick did acquire the property, and that was out of the county auction, so that was auction for back county taxes. The porch was removed, and then you can see we were able to replace the porch, obviously not to its former grandeur, but we were able to replace that front porch as a gesture to the neighborhood. So John Good oversaw that construction. Matt, you want to keep going with the photographs? John, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say about this process, but here's some before and after photos.
It's a very beautiful house, a lot of woodwork, and our biggest aim was to try and keep a large part of the character with the woodwork.
Yeah, East has a lot of older. I don't know why the history built to why they predate a lot of the other stuff that's.
I would say this was probably one of the first homes built in the area, and it was probably the person who owned this home probably owned everything as far as he could see.
Yeah, in fact, if there were so many bedrooms, there were 6 bedrooms.
And changed one into a primary bathroom.
So now there's 2.5 bathrooms, which really does make more sense for, just today's living.
Today's market, I mean, today's market requires a minimum of 1.5, and with 5 bedrooms, it just made no sense not to only have one full bathroom.
So, even though this was grant funded, there were no restrictions for us to sell this property to someone at 80%, 80 to 100% AMI. It is unrestricted. So because of the amount of money that did go into the property, this was sold unrestricted sale. We listed the property on May 20th, listing price of $329,900. 2 offers received. So the offers essentially equate to $111 per square foot for the offers. What we'd like to put forth to the board, because the offers are so similar and because occasionally deals can fall through, is we would ask the board to approve both of these potential buyers, one at $341,000 and then one at $348,000 with an $8,000 concession. And that way we would have the ability to deal with either one of these buyers and try to manage a 60-day close. Ben, I'm not sure anything special about the sale or working with the realtor or the process, anything there?
Thankfully straightforward.
And we do have a vacant lot right next door to that property where a new Benlick home is going to be built. So, we're impacting more than one house. I think we're doing actually 3 houses on that block of East in total, including me. So nice to get some work done on that block.
Nelson, can you explain the $8,000 concessions that deals?
Yes.
Essentially what it is they sign a mortgage for $348,000 saying they're gonna sell it. We're gonna sell it to them for that, but we're giving them $8,000 back to help with their closing costs. So their net that comes to us is only $340,000.
That's something they asked, we offer.
They ask, and that's fairly common with FHA financing because a lot of the closing costs tend to be a little higher and such. That's why probably I agree with Jocelyn to approve both of them, but maybe say which one's gonna be priority.
And the resolution has the CNCOC.
Yes, that'll say that.
The secondary being. Actually,
Yes.
Right, the $341,000 offer is the priority in the first resolve of the resolution.
What is the word fund being added on both? The mortgage company. Mortgage company.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was it?
It says funds, and I didn't know what fund meant.
Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Is there an appraisal in for these properties?
They
For the
will
property,
get an appraisal when they basically go apply for the mortgage. Conventional is more likely to go through with little problem, whereas FHA tends to be a big issue, although it shouldn't be an issue with this home.
Out of curiosity, did the listing agent, I know sometimes there's a strategy of listing to get people attracted to it with the assumption that it's gonna get bid up. Or sometimes they just list it as along with comps in the neighborhood. Was there a strategy? Did we just get lucky here? What was, how did that go with?
They certainly used comps that were available, with the quality of the rehab, it's hard to find specific comps. For a home that's been completely got rehabbed in the Black Rock area to this level. So, looking at Riverside area, and I think some of the surrounding neighborhoods, 329 felt competitive. You had two very motivated offers. So you could say that is lucky. Sure.
Basically, remember, regardless of what we put into it, the neighborhood dictates what we're gonna be able to sell it for.
Yeah.
And in this case, this is probably one of the highest sales in that neighborhood in a long time.
I think that's my question on appraisal. What happens if they don't get to this number on appraisal?
I don't think there'll be a problem with this house because we won't be able to get comps within that exact neighborhood, so they'll be able to go out a little bit further for comps. And it'll be a little bit easier under the conventional financing to do that, whereas FHA requires at least 2 comps within 90 days.
Historically,
At that size,
historically, I think we made up that one that's under appraised that we sold. In that event, it may come back to the board, but we don't feel that this is a risk, a large risk that would happen.
Now, the conventional shouldn't be a problem, the FHA could potentially.
it's just a big square footage for a Buffalo house in like, you know what I mean? It's quite, and that's the concern, like, there's not a lot of comps in that size until you get to like Central Park.
And that's what helps it because the size and appraiser is able to go out further. And it's the same way I would appraise it if I was doing it.
What was the square footage on it?
A little over 3,000.
So my bed's 2.5 beds.
Big old house.
That's nice. It's for a nice big family, probably generational.
And again, we're gonna be meeting here next Friday at 10 a.m. to begin our walking tour. So you can get a chance to walk around. It's really
Gorgeous.
yeah.
Great.
In terms of the strings from the grant, you said not AMI, not the 80%, anything about owner occupancy for a period of time or any strings for the new owners? Can they turn around and sell it next year?
Potentially they could, but since they're paying market value for it,
Yeah.
we're not really giving them anything.
Anything else for the presentation, or is there a pleasure of the board?
So.
I'll make.
I just have one comment. I've never had to confront seller concessions by a land bank. It does have me slightly concerned as to whether a land bank can offer concessions. And I know I just don't have time to look into it further at the moment before you act, but it begins to look a little bit like a gift, which land banks obviously cannot do with public funds. But that's a technical point. You could sell it for $340, obviously, without the concessions. So it's just something if you get to that second offer, I guess, if the first one doesn't pan out, maybe we revisit that. I just have a slight concern there. I just wanted to voice that before you went too much further.
Well, since those concessions, John, are coming directly from the mortgage proceeds, that shouldn't affect us because it's coming directly out of mortgage proceeds from the bank. They're actually getting a mortgage for $348, giving us $340, and the bank's giving them $8,000.
Right, but on the closing statement, it'll show you crediting them for $8,000 of their closing costs.
Yeah, essentially, but again, it's still proceeds of the lender, not proceeds of us.
So should
Yeah,
either. approve the one or approve both with a note that we have to have legal counsel, you know?
Yeah, I
Yep.
think,
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I like that. The latter solution I like.
The second one, John?
That's correct.
Hopefully we'll never get there.
So Nadine, you're in
Yeah,
the
I would-
process of making the motion.
I will, I'll make a motion to approve an amended resolution that says, to add to the second resolved upon confirmation with legal counsel.
And it's probably good going forward because if it's happening here, it's gonna happen elsewhere and it's good to know going.
You good with that stipulation, John?
Oh, yes. And I understand seller concessions are very common, but it's a little tricky here as a public entity.
So Nadine's made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Catherine. Motion made and seconded with additional stipulation to the second resolved paragraph. Anything else on the question? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And just as a general comment, I think if concessions are that common, we'll probably see them when we start selling our infill housing, the 47 units, so we should get clarification on the legality regardless.
Yep, understood.
So we're done with item number 4. Why don't we go revisit item number 2 and then we can segue into 5. So John, you're up for the balance before we get to Jocelyn.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. So my understanding is that Benlick has struggled to get properties through the tax foreclosure process. I gather since the Supreme Court told us that what most of us were doing in the state of New York for a couple generations or more is unconstitutional. And so I think the thought here was to have a discussion really about how perhaps to reinstitute the process by which you can obtain properties through the tax foreclosure process. I do hope, and I know the technology is a little tricky, but I hope to have more of a discussion, maybe than just a straight presentation. Feel free to tell me to shut up or interrupt anytime you like. So you folks have 4 FGUs, 4 foreclosing governmental units, 3 of which are what we refer to as Article 11 communities. They do their tax foreclosures under Article 11. That's the city of Buffalo, Lackawanna, and Tonawanda. Erie County is the odd man out. They do not use Article 11. They opted out. I am not familiar with the Erie County Tax Act, but I know Jeremy, I think, is in the room, probably excruciatingly familiar with it. So he can help draw the comparisons and fill in the blanks in the blanks there.
That's a lot of
What I thought I would do is start with the changes to the law in Article 11 that were made. So I see you've got your summary here on the screen, Ben, but I was going to start with the statute.
John, I just want, just for a second, everybody has a hard copy package, and then the last page might be particularly useful to look at, because it really is a review of the foreclosure process. So that can be helpful to everybody and also to follow along with it. Okay, sorry, John, go ahead.
That's okay. So what I thought I would do is review some of the changes to Article 11 that came in the wake of the Supreme Court decision. Talk about those first to kind of set the table, and then maybe go into some more practical solutions. But feel free, Scott as chair, whoever, if you don't want to spend too much time on the law and want to jump to the practical side of things, feel free. Like, tell me to stop, and we can jump right into that. But I'm looking at what I sent to Ben, which is the section 1195 of the real property tax law. It starts with definitions. So if you have that available, what I tried to do is just extract out of the real property tax law, Article 11, where the significant relevant changes were that we have to deal with. And what hopefully you'll see there is the state decided we needed 4 new definitions. The first one was a former homeowner definition. And unfortunately, the state right out of the gate created additional confusion for us with this definition. And I've already had a lot of questions, comments, confusions over this. And they define a former homeowner as a person who lost title to or ownership of residential property due to a tax foreclosure. They do not define residential property for us. Former homeowner, residential property, nor did they point us to an existing definition of residential property, which there are others in the law and specifically in the real property law, often 1 to 4 family houses, but they don't say that here. And so there's been a lot of confusion about what a quote former homeowner is under the tax foreclosure rules now. This is John Sid talking. I don't know what they intended, but I wouldn't use the term former homeowner to refer to a landlord typically. I don't think that's what they had in mind, but the way they wrote it, if I'm a landlord who owns residential property, whether it's 1 to 4, someone could argue it's a 100-unit apartment building, that I could be a former homeowner under this definition. I mention this only because it becomes important later because former homeowners are given some additional rights under Article 11 later on. They're given a much longer period of time to make claims for surplus. So
John?
Yeah.
So, I get that it's a little confusing with these residential properties, commercial properties. Does none of this apply to commercial properties?
No, this all applies to commercial properties. The former homeowners get additional rights. So if your question is, do we have to worry about surplus and valuing properties for commercial properties? The answer is yes, absolutely.
Okay.
The only real difference you'll see in a couple of minutes here is that former homeowners get 3 years to claim surplus. That if there's surplus sitting there, they get 3 extra years to show up to claim it. No one else gets that right. That's really the important point. They also gave us a definition of a public sale. Not sure that was really necessary. If you're looking at my presentation, you'll see some text in red. Just to clarify, the red text is what I've pasted in. It's not in the statute. I pasted it in to make reading easier, so you don't have to go looking for other definitions. But a public sale under the Article 11 now is just essentially an auction. The important point there is it's an auction sold at public auction to the highest bidder. So there's no discretion when you're having a public auction. It must be sold to the highest bidder at the auction. And that can become important for lots of reasons.
John and Scott, I just want to put a little asterisk on the 3 years, and I turn to Jeremy on this one, that just because it's obviously with the county with the tax act, our surplus monies go to the comptroller's office. Not that you have this handy right now, but if you knew or could find out how long does the comptroller hang on to the funds before they issue to the state?
You know, I just asked that question like 5 months ago and I don't remember.
Because I mean, there may be parallels, but I just wanted to put an asterisk on that. Thank you, John.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question either. I bet it's on the comptroller's website. Yeah. So then they gave us a definition of surplus. Again, not sure we needed it. It's pretty straightforward. But it's essentially the net gain, if any, realized by the tax district upon the sale of the tax foreclosed property. And they specify that. I'll get to that in just a second. They specify that in a little more detail under 1196. But basically, it's obvious. It's the difference between what is owed to the taxing jurisdiction minus the sale price. If there's extra, that's surplus. If there isn't, obviously there is not. And then they felt the need to give us a definition of a tax foreclosed property, which again is pretty straightforward, but it's any property that was subject to a final judgment of tax foreclosure after complying with Article 11. So then I jumped to section 1196, which is where we determine whether there is surplus and how much it is. So under Article 11, the taxing jurisdiction has a 45-day period after the tax foreclosure sale to determine whether there was, in fact, a surplus attributable to the sale. And if there was, how much is it? And what you'll see, I pasted in there, section 1102. because some of the additions where we know what the taxes are, kind of obvious. We have interest, we have penalties, everything that shows up on our tax bills, we know what's owed. But they did take the opportunity here to throw in some other items because it's very important that the taxing jurisdictions really be made whole. And they have additional costs and expenses beyond just the taxes, interest penalties, special assessments, user charges, all the things we're familiar with. So they added this laundry list of additional items, which the foreclosing governmental units are entitled to add to that lien amount before they determine if there's a surplus. So obviously helpful in making everybody whole. I won't necessarily read them to you. They're here. There's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. You know, it's all the costs of going through the process of the foreclosure, filing the legal fees, the cost of filing fees. One important point is the cost of an appraisal. If one is used to determine a surplus, that gets added as well. And as I said, the cost of searching the public record, conducting the proceeding. So the important point here is we get. Did somebody have a question?
No, that was a drop.
Okay. The important point here is we get to add everything that to make the counties whole before we determine whether there's a surplus or not. We then get into what is the purchase price first that the foreclosing governmental unit has received to determine, you know, from which it'll subtract all the expenses and charges to determine if there's a surplus. They've made it crystal clear that if it is a public sale, that auction we already talked about, the price it sells for the auction is the price. Simple. And I'm a land bank attorney, so I advocate for land banks typically. If I wasn't a land bank attorney, if I was, for instance, a county attorney, a corporation counsel, and my clients came to me, the county, the city, whoever came to me and said, you know, this surplus business has us scared. We're not sure what to do about it. We don't want to get sued. We don't want to have to come out of pocket. Keep us safe. What's the safest thing we can do to avoid any risk whatsoever? That's the easiest legal advice I could ever give. Send all your foreclosed properties to the public auction. Right? It's clear under the law, both under this statute and under other case law, that's the best indicator of what the value is. It's a safe harbor, if you will. You will have cash on the barrelhead at that moment that someone paid and bid. So you'll have this, if there is a surplus, it'll be right there in hand to distribute. No one has to pay for it. So that's that. But being a land bank attorney, I think that's a terrible, result. I can speak, better to Syracuse. The term public auction in the city of Syracuse has become a dirty word. The end result was terrible for the city. I'm sure Buffalo deals with the same things. We have slumlords, we have out-of-town speculators. The highest bidder is not the best bidder, the best owner, I should say. But I just put that out there for you. So again, if it's a public sale, the purchase price is easy. That's what you're going to use to determine whether there's a surplus. Article 11 went on to include how will you determine that purchase price when it's not a public sale? And they gave us 3 options. The first one is using the full value of the property as shown on the most recent tax roll. And that is, of course, the assessed value, but adjusted by the equalization rate. That would be the fair market value on the most recent tax roll. Now, when this was being drafted, we advocated that not be one of the options. It depends where you live, frankly. The assessed values are all over the board. I understand the equalization rate's designed to accommodate that and correct for it. But it's just, in my personal opinion, it's subject to challenge. They're not the best indicators of value, in my opinion. But it's in the law, which means it's a perfectly legal way to determine the value. So I point that out to you. That's option A. Option B is an appraisal prepared by, No questions? Option B is an appraisal prepared by a licensed New York State appraiser that establishes the value of the property as of the date of the transfer of the title. Really important that you want that appraisal done ideally on the day of the foreclosure, the day of the seizure, or as soon as humanly possible thereafter. That's the goal. We want to know what it's worth at that moment in time. The other important thing that we find here is, a lot of these houses we don't know what's going on inside them before the foreclosure. And if you can get an appraiser inside the house, that makes a huge difference. They're full of junk, there's missing pipes and so forth. So that tends to be very important in terms of getting a more accurate value for determining the value of the house to determine if there's surplus. So B is, I guess, I don't know if I'll say it, but it's my personal favorite, but I think it's the most accurate determination. And then C was a catch-all. I actually wrote C, and it somehow made it into the statute. It's just a catch-all. So maybe this is my favorite because I wrote it, but and just like any lawyer, it doesn't really say anything. But I like it for two reasons. One, it opens the door to someone smart, certainly smarter than me, and maybe all of us someday, to figure out another way to determine the value. Because I thought it was important to, all anybody could think of today was using the appraised value, an appraisal or the assessed value. But there may be other better ways that someone will think of. And so that option is open as well. But I think overall, it just summarizes what the goal of all of us is, which is to come up with a value which results in just compensation to the former owner and other parties whose interests were extinguished by the foreclosure, mortgage holders and so forth. So that's the goal here, right? We're trying to come up with a fair value, I should say a just value, and that's important, just. We're not realtors. We're not staging someone's house for them. We're not trying to get the highest, best dollar that someone might get on their own in the open market. We're getting just compensation under the circumstances of a tax foreclosure. So those are the mechanisms, the three mechanisms on a non-public sale.
John, do they specify on the appraisal by an appraiser, whether it's gotta be an interior or exterior only appraisal?
They do not. Just an appraisal conducted by. We, as I kind of alluded to, we like them inside if we can get them inside, because we think, I don't want to be on record on trying to diminish surplus. That's not my point. My point is to get an accurate assessment of value.
John, I'm just brainstorming with ideas. I don't know if this is even possible, but so if you look at the wording for not the three other ways to determine value, but it says public auction to the highest bidder. Is there any legal way, like, all right, so there's an open auction, something gets up to $100,000. We know that's the auction value. There's a predetermined secret list, and I say secret because you wouldn't want the bidders to know which properties are on that list. It's not that you're trying to hide something from the public. And the land bank has the opportunity to match that price because the auction just determined it's the auction value.
So the answer is I think so. There's a way to do something similar to what I think you're describing. What we can't do is cut off a higher bid, right? We can't cut off the potential for surplus. And we can jump to it any time. What we're going to get to is what I think should be the case is the land bank can bid at a public auction, but to use your example, the $100,000 winning price, let's just pretend that the lien amount is 50 grand. The private, I'm going to call the slumlord who's bidding the 100, he has to pay 100. The land bank should only be required to pay 50. Because you're going to forgive, I believe you have in the past, and you should, in my opinion, forgive the tax lien, right? You weren't collecting it before, so that's a mechanism by which the land bank gets a huge advantage, right? They should never have to pay that lien amount, in my opinion. And I was gonna get to that later, but there's in my view, no county or city should be making itself whole on the back of a land bank, right? Why do you have a land bank? You're trying to repurpose these properties, get them back on the roll, redevelop for the future. So I don't know if that helps, but that's,
So in that example, John, that this, the $50,000 that is bid by the land bank would all go to the previous owner as surplus, and the municipality, the county, city, whoever would eat the 50,000.
correct. And the only thing I would say is it goes to those in, with an interest. There may be a mortgage first, a judgment creditor, so forth, before it gets to the owner. But that would be so in other words, someone has the downside to a non-public sale. I talked about a public sale. They're easy. The cash is on the barrelhead, right? When you do a non-public sale, that surplus, if any, needs to come out of somebody's pocket. And that's the uncomfortable discussion that we all have to have, is where does it come from? And I work with some land banks are paying it, some cities and counties are paying it. But that's the uncomfortable part of the discussion, that we need to pay the surplus. You can't avoid it.
Who's
Right.
paying? Even if it goes to the land bank, who's paying that $50,000? That example. That's the question mark.
Hey, John,
It's-
we're about to lose our quorum. Just if there's any, while we still have part of the quorum here, if there's any further bits of knowledge you wanted to drop on us, now would be a good time.
Okay.
To put summary.
So I did drop to this discussion. I gave Ben a 2-page document, I think, that starts with non-public sales under Article 11 of the RPTL. This is an excerpt from an agreement I'm working on for another community, and it's kind of like the wish list in a way of what an agreement like this might look like, with folks with foreclosing governmental units. So as I said, the idea is that land banks should have a credit bid. They should have a credit bid in the amount of that lien amount. So they can bid competitively at the auctions. With that advantage, they don't have to come up with cash, and they only have to pay the surplus. And then you conduct this. We didn't talk about it, but there's that whole surplus money proceeding that has to take place, where a mortgage holder, judgment creditor, former owner shows up, tries to claim the surplus. If it's a former homeowner and they didn't file a claim in the first place and there's surplus left over, they get 3 years. So you're waiting around 3 years, unfortunately, for that. But when it's all over, that surplus can remain local. That was one of the other changes they made to Article 11. So I know Erie County, you're sending it to the state. Article 11 says you can keep it. So if you're thinking about making changes to the Erie County Tax Act, that's one of the ones I would consider making for sure. And one of the questions I have for you, Jeremy, I suppose, does the Erie County Tax Act allow for non-public sales to determine surplus? I'm going to guess it does not, but.
I don't think it specifically allows, for
Yeah.
purposes of determining value. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I know kudos to Erie County. You've been accounting for surplus for years, I believe, right?
I'm sorry, what?
Can you say that again, John?
Sure. Erie County has accounted for surplus in its tax foreclosures for years.
We have a method by which people can, under the current tax act, we have a method by which the surplus is held by the controller. There's a process by which people get it.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. And that surplus is determined how? By sale at the public auction?
Yes.
Right. So, and that makes sense. Again, I would encourage the county perhaps to incorporate these other methods so they could undertake non-public sales, non-auctions for determining that same surplus.
Tried to amend the tax act. It's fallen to political, and it hasn't been amended. So I don't know that there's any appetite right now.
Understood.
Even if it's required, I'm not sure that there's any appetite.
So yeah, those are really the highlights. I could walk through what I think would be a great agreement, these provisions that I've had a hand in putting together. which involves, again, on a non-public sale, you would either use, my preference would be to do the appraisal method for determining the surplus. So the property would not go to auction. The land bank, to your point, there might be a list. The land bank provides the list to the county. We would like these properties. Those are pulled out of the auction. They're conveyed to the land bank. An appraisal is done for determining the surplus, the value for surplus. If you choose or the county chooses to use the assessed value, that's perfectly legal under Article 11. I don't recommend it, but you can do it. And then the question is, who pays the surplus? In the language you have before you, it says the county, under those circumstances, would pay the surplus. It would go through the surplus money proceeding, and then anything left over reverts back to the county, of course. And then on public sales, I propose, as I think we've already just touched on this, where the land bank can come as a credit bid, they would pay the surplus, and in that case, the land bank from its own funds would pay the surplus. Again, that's subject to negotiation as well. But
I don't know if this is right or wrong, but just for sake of the exercise, could we do an assessment that assesses, or I'm sorry, an appraisal, appraises for 150? And then we know what the appraisal price is, but we put it out at the auction, see where it goes, and that market determines it's 100,000. Is there any problem there with hedging our decision making?
so the answer is maybe. Pretend you're the former homeowner. I have an appraisal on one hand that says it's worth X, and I have a public auction that said it was worth X minus. We would argue the auction was the better value. The appraisal was an educated guess. But you're just opening yourself up to that question and a potential claim from the former homeowner that the appraisal was in fact the better value. And I didn't touch on there is a provision in the statute that when you determine the price using one of those three other methods, the non-public sale, parties in interest can challenge that in the court proceeding. And if it's up to the judge. If the judge determines by a preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, that the value is higher, they can order a revaluation of the property. So that there is an additional risk, slight additional risk there, but.
I have another question. So, it took me about 10 months to wrap my head around the super bid, and then of course it's a super bid. So explain under the super bid, what money was exchanged hands? So like the land bank would have the super bid on certain properties. They went in and they said, we're taking this one, we're taking this one, we're taking this one. Then what happened? Did anybody get any money?
Well, there is a proceeds distribution policy.
Distribution.
Right, and that proceeds repayment, that proceeds distribution policy or whatever it was called, that was the definition of the super bid. Right, so a super bid can be whatever you want it to be, and in the county's case, the super bid definition was that proceeds distribution policy.
And it was something that we did at, quote unquote, as a courtesy with the legislature on an annual basis, even though a courtesy.
Right,
But
but what was the last, and I remember fighting over it and trying to explain it, I never understood it, the legislature understood it, but what was that final?
Well, it was a calculation that depended on what that outstanding actual back tax amount was, how much money did Benlick actually put into the property to improve it, what was the sale, and it's all
The sale
fell down.
from land bank.
Right.
So that, and that's the key distinction that I gotta write.
Yeah.
So under our previous process, the land bank, the money's really not exchanging hands until the land bank sells it.
Correct, it was a phantom bid.
Right.
So we would phantom bid the
Right.
maximum back tax amount.
Right.
So in some cases, we would bid $450,000 on a property in Angola, right? A vacant lot that just had all of this stuff piled up on it
Right.
for years and years. 450, that was our phantom. And then going through the final calculations, you know, that would depend on what, if anything, were repaid to the county.
Once land bank turned it over.
Yeah, but again,
Correct.
we would have turned it over having made some kind of improvement.
Right, but the point is that
Right.
under the new paradigm, and this gets, I think, what Catherine was saying, is my head, is that these decisions now have to be figured out at the auction, because money has to potentially go to the previous owner. We don't
Only the
have
only the surplus.
it, right, if there's surplus, but that was not something we could put in the super bid.
Agreed,
And worry and deal with it after the proceeds, after the land bank sold the
100%.
property. And now we have to decide it at the auction, right?
Exactly. Someone has to deal with the surplus. Correct. It has to be, and I recommend you pay it immediately, if not sooner. There's some people who want to wait, to your point, wait till the land bank refurbishes it and sells it to try to pay the surplus. I think that's a bad idea. You want to,
That probably wouldn't pass constitutional scrutiny, right, John?
I agree. You're opening yourself up to interest claims for interest.
Yeah.
It's, you know, that surplus is due to them on the day of the seizure, the tax foreclosure. So
So, right,
Yeah.
so how does, and this is the Catherine question, sort of rephrased in my head, is how does the land bank as a bidder, what does the land bank do on that day? What are they responsible for? What are they not responsible for? Who's paying who to
Right.
get the property into the land bank's hands?
Yeah.
When there's a surplus.
and that needs to be negotiated. So it's either the land bank is coming out of its pocket for the surplus amount, or the county is, or the city is, respectively. Someone needs to pay that surplus, and it's,
I have a
Right.
question and a comment. So my
Yep.
question, are you suggesting, so I thought what you said earlier is the previous owner has 3 years to go to whoever auctioned their property and say, I want the surplus. Are you suggesting that we don't wait for that person to come ask for it and just cut a check and mail it to them?
oh, no, I did not. I
Okay,
don't,
alright.
certainly
Okay.
not. No,
Okay, that was the question. You're saying like set it aside and escrow it somewhere so that if they ever did come and ask for it, it's there for.
so let me be crystal clear on that. If you're an Article 11 community, which everybody but Erie County is, you're required to pay the surplus into the court. You have to pay it into the court.
And then if 3 years goes by, you get it back?
Correct.
Okay, all right, sorry, thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
And then the other thing, I think whether it's the city, the town, whoever's writing this stuff, I think we have to think about and anticipate how bad actors will look to abuse the system, because we have seen over and over again that there are highly sophisticated groups of slumlords out there who exploit the system in every way possible. And this could be a really great thing that's meant to help, you know, an estate or someone, you know, it can be exploited, but it's probably gonna take a few years for it to start getting exploited once something happens. But I think as any legislation is written, that has to be anticipated as best we can, because
Sure.
it's gonna happen on the other side. They're gonna be thinking about it.
Agreed. Go ahead.
Sorry, leading into that same thing, John, I'm looking at this, and this is part of me coming from an appraiser standpoint. Is basically a foreclosure auction price is not considered fair market value for the purposes of an appraisal. So that creates a whole nother thing of what is fair market value.
Yeah, and if I've been using the term fair market value, it might be a slip, right? I'm focused on the definitions in the statute. We can use we have three options for the non-public sales. Those are my options. You know, how accurate they are, and I understand they could deviate, you know, one might be significantly different than the other.
I mean, I guess the way that goes in is we're talking about part of it is that an appraisal can be used as fair market value or the sale price of the foreclosure option, which by definition under appraisals are two different things. Because the foreclosure option is considered a distress sale.
understood. Yep.
I have a question, Scott, didn't we do a land bank only auction once? So if that is allowable. Land bank only auction where the county appraises, no?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's different. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I cut you off too soon. You're right.
Yeah, so if the land bank identifies 25 properties and the county's okay with the land bank and those 25 properties, and the county pays for, or the land bank pays for an appraisal on each.
Yep.
That would be a way to
Right.
not have to deal with the day of calculation. It would essentially not be a public auction.
Right. I guess that's my question. What do you mean by that? Really wouldn't be a public auction. That's a non-public sale.
Yeah, and we're allowed to do that under the tax act, right? Because we've done that.
Well, that was done as a super bid. That's why it was a Benlick only auction, because it was Benlick saying, we are going to exercise
Yeah.
our super bid on these properties.
But
So
Yeah.
you could have in theory, multiple in-rem auctions. And you could say, this is the land bank preferred auction. Benlick would have to have, in this scenario, the appraisals in their back pocket and saying, we will bid up to this amount. Knowing that this would be like the approved surplus, because we, however the funding would work between the land bank and the county. Somebody would be saying, this is as much as we're willing to pay. If a third party comes in and bids over it, then you'd have the possibility of the land bank saying, we're out. Third party then would be the winning bid.
well, so now how's that any different than just doing that on the day?
It's not. It was that Benlick specific land bank was because of COVID. That we had other properties building up, and it was like, we knew that exercising the preferred bid was.
But we did, I mean, so this is before I was county attorney, so we did, however, form an in-rem auction where only the land bank participated.
Or
Right.
only
You
the
can't do
land
that. You just can't do that anymore.
Yeah, 2022, we did that, yeah. But we can't.
It would be, you'd be, it would be,
preferred bid.
But why can't you do that if you appraise all the properties that are being exchanged and make, if there is in fact a surplus identified by the appraisal,
Right.
you have a mechanism for paying the previous homeowner? Why would that be problematic?
You come up
no,
with a
it's not problematic. It's just not an auction. It's not a public sale. It's not an
You
auction.
just consider it a non-public sale.
Under the
Yeah.
patent.
Yeah, you don't need the auction for.
Right.
Right.
You don't need to, you just do it. You just do it.
direct transfer.
Oh, right, so it's not, right, it's not an auction.
Right.
I'm not
'Cause
saying
again,
that's
it-
correct.
It sounds
the
like,
lo-
John, what you're saying is that's preferable, rather than put it to auction, in your opinion.
I do. It allows the land bank to select, these are our problem areas. These are the properties we want and need to accomplish our mission and purpose. And the county and city are cooperative with that. We're going to value them. We're going to determine our surplus. And the county and city are willing to, assume some of the risk associated with that process, right? As I said, the public auction is essentially risk-free. This does open the possibility to challenge more than the public auction does. But I should say there have been challenges to the public auction too. They always lose, but they challenge them.
And one of and this is the political concern, given the makeup of the legislature, and getting back to the distribution of proceeds. There are a couple legislators who are not happy about Benlick's ability to do a preferred bid.
Right, yeah.
So if we did a direct sale to Benlick, even though there's an appraisal there, their argument would be, well, shouldn't we have gone to the market, the public auction, and let however the bids went go to that?
Sure.
But I'm sorry, one more thing on that. If we did, and I'm sorry, I used the auction, I shouldn't have used, we just do a direct sale to Benlick on a property that has been appraised. And let's say the back taxes are 50, appraisal is 100. The only thing we really have to worry about in terms of the county is that $50,000 to the surplus. We could
Correct.
we could waive the $50,000, or we could tell Benley, when you sell it, we have a lien, the first $50,000 comes to us, or some other. But the only
Yeah.
thing we really have to worry about at the time of transfer is the surplus, if there is a
Yeah.
surplus.
Agree 100%. We didn't get to talk about that, reimbursing the counties after the fact, after the land bank has reimbursed itself, all its costs. Do you share some money back with the city or county? I tried it. I think that's politically smart. I try to avoid it because we want the land bank to be vibrant and have funds to continue to do what it does. But and whether there be any money left over at the end of the day is unlikely. So, but probably a pretty politically smart thing to include.
Am I correct in assuming that almost always an appraisal would come in higher than what comes in at auction, except when you get in there and you find out there's like a mess in the house, is that
Yeah,
a reasonable assumption?
Well, you've got an appraiser in the room that I'll defer to the appraiser in the room, but I will also add to the, I'm not going to hazard a guess because I don't know, but I will say this. You can be strategic about the properties you foreclose on, right? You can, you know how big the tax bill is before you start the process, and you probably have some idea of what it's going to be worth. So, don't be foreclosing on properties with a very low tax bill that, so you can be strategic about intentionally not creating surplus.
And that also goes to like equity, someone may go through a couple of hard years, but there's a lot of nice things about that.
I mean, probably the only benefit there is the appraiser should be able to get interior access, whereas a bidder would not.
Correct. Yep.
John, the agreement between the Syracuse Land Bank and the city, is that relatively what has been kind of laid out in this idea of a non-public sale? You're calculating surplus ahead of time and there's a conveyance to the land bank by the city.
That's correct. And just to add, what we've worked out here is the land bank is fronting the surplus when there is any. But the city has agreed to reimburse the city on an annual basis the amount of the surplus that they expend. And that was on a 1-year basis because this was all new. So we were trying to figure it out. They agreed to reimburse us 300 grand, up to 300 grand in surplus, and then they were going to revisit it. We're nowhere near there. These properties are pretty distressed. There hasn't been a big issue, frankly, here. But that's what we're doing here.
Now, on that surplus, if it goes 3 years without being claimed, would that go to the municipality or could that potentially come back to the land bank?
So it's under Article 11, the surplus is supposed to go back to the foreclosing governmental unit, so the county or the city. In my scenario where if the land bank's required to pay the surplus, for instance, at the public auction we mentioned, they get a credit bid for the lien amount, they pay the surplus. I think it's only fair that money find its way back to the land bank. I'm not quite sure. The material you have in front of you, I said that the surplus will go back to the land bank. Someone may argue that under Article 11, that's not permitted. So maybe we finagle that with a line item in the budget. Money's fungible. Maybe the county or the city funds the land bank, the amount of the unclaimed surplus after 3 years. We could do something like that. But if the land bank pays it, it seems like it should work its way back to the land bank.
And it sounds like in Syracuse, what's happening is the land bank is putting forward that surplus, but the city's basically funding them back at the end of the year for all the surplus they put up.
Exactly.
There's a lot definitely for us to think about for some of us to bring back to our respective governmental entities, whether it be the city of Buffalo or the county of Erie or the other cities, unfortunately, that aren't here today.
Let me just ask from the land bank, current capacity, we got this big art potential. So I don't feel like reintroducing acquisition of properties through an in-rem is a pressing
concern or
No, I think, I would agree with that, but I think having a path laid out, whether we're here, whether the board, who knows what the board composition will be like in 5 years, but we'll have a memorialized, equitable process.
But this is not something we're looking to accomplish this fall.
No, but I mean, I guess I'd say also we have a path with the city, in some ways, not for structures, but for lots, just because there are so many of them.
Yeah.
And we negotiate with the city on those things, where the county doesn't take title to any properties.
Right.
So we essentially have very few, we don't have structures or lots. Because at this point now, we've sold them all or worked with anything we had in the
Right.
county, and now we don't have any path
There's
to acquire new.
Right, there's no mechanism outside of the city of Buffalo. They play for city of Tonawanda and for this. Oh, no, what about city of Tonawanda, city of Lackawanna, would they have?
We would need a very similar
Have both
agreement,
of those,
yeah,
And
ideally a similar agreement.
actually, I think it may end up being more pressing than what we're thinking, because within 6 to 8 months, we're gonna have to start reinvesting money.
Right, so the county is
we're
gonna
not-
have a pot of recyclable ARP funds, and similarly with the city. So there doesn't seem to necessarily be a shortage of vacant lots that we could use. But I know Nadine's not here, I don't wanna speak for her, but if we are to participate in the auction again in the city and the county, we need a path
Yeah.
to acquire.
Yeah.
And that was where I was gonna get at, was that we're not quite to phase two, but if we don't start thinking about what's gonna happen with phase two, we could end up with that situation of just kind of sitting with their hands and a pot of money, and where does that go? And how then down the road, phase three, et cetera, as that phase two pot diminishes, what are we doing?
But the county executive and it is not inconceivable that for a period of time, the policy is to use the county surplus, the county funds that you're gonna create towards city rehab, in which case we don't have a problem.
Yeah, just I think the important thing is that we actually just don't have an agreement as to how to use those recycled funds
Right.
at all.
Right.
So once we get through this phase one and we sell all these houses, now what?
And what's the time that just be?
Well, and we were talking about in the pre-meeting meeting to have something before the board, maybe September-ish, for the board to start considering, here's what we're talking about with phase two months. Because the closings would occur at the earliest November, but more likely December. Yeah.
Temporarily, before those decisions are made, is there at least something to put it in that interest bearing account we have? We have a,
Yeah, I mean, we can put them in treasury bills and municipal money markets. Yeah, we can have it generating income. It's just that there's no definition on how to use it.
right, and it's not something you wanna do haphazardly, you want it well thought out.
Not something that's gonna happen overnight.
As long as it's earning a little interest while decisions are being made,
For sure. So TBD, I mean,
It's all through TBD. I think what would be good information, John, you had mentioned about that there are some different approaches that are being taken by different land banks presently, or the different foreclosing governmental units. Maybe get some statistics as to which routes those units are taking.
The answer is sure. I'm just trying to think of the best way. Jocelyn, we might want to work through the association for some of that. I can speak to Syracuse. And at least one other at the moment.
as we go, right?
Yeah. But we could certainly talk about it on our statewide calls, because I don't have a sense of what everyone else is doing yet.
Yeah, I can actually put that on the agenda for the call. We have a board meeting next week. So
That'd be great. That'd be great.
And it may be so preliminary that we don't have a lot of statistics other than the sample size of 2 that were up. But
Yeah.
it's something to take back to the members as we are considering this.
Understood.
Maybe this is what you're already thinking of, but it'd be interesting to know we might only have 1 year or whatever, but who's coming back with a surplus, what percentage? That's what you're getting.
Well, not just the surplus percentage, but what routes are they taking? So what are,
Oh,
what,
gotcha.
what,
So they can't see which, okay, I got it.
Yeah. As I said, the huge question is who pays the surplus? That's the one that just can't be avoided. It's uncomfortable, but it has to be resolved if you're gonna do a non-public sale.
Would it be helpful at all, Scott, for us to start like massaging a open framework of an agreement that would, that we just responded to?
it would be helpful, at least for the board, to start getting its head around it, so that way we can start bringing it back to the members and see what their feelings are. Are they, where would they like the phase two to go to? Cause that will help push that discussion of, hey, here's a pathway. For some of the monies that, you know, we have the non-public sales, we have the auctions, or we have some money that are coming in from phase two that could be used towards acquiring the city parcels right now.
What, do you see this, going to an existing committee, is it governance, real estate, or is this a special committee, or how do you see this work outside of?
I think if we have a staff policy, staff framework come up, then we can decide whether it would be governance or real estate, or who would be better to consider.
Okay.
So then moving on,
Yeah, John.
we had some of the discussion earlier about the video recordings. I don't know if there's anything further you wanted to add, other than for my own edification, I wanted to see how searchable that would be. Cause if it's not searchable, then. Yeah, I'd like to maintain the current method, but if it
Sure.
is searchable, then it's something we could consider.
I'm not technically knowledgeable enough to know the answer to that.
Are other land banks just going with the video recordings, or what are they? from
Are
your
not the one,
experience?
the other ones I represent are still doing written, minutes. Yep.
I like written minutes. I think it makes sense. It's responsible. It's best for the team, but you know.
You know, ErieNet, though, is using video, I believe, minutes, so I.
I'd rather.
We still approve
Yeah,
written
yeah, if there's a way to do a secondary method in addition to the first, great, but I don't think it's right to stop our.
Matt, you're still on the hook.
Yeah.
You do such a good job.
So we would need those minutes provided from the prior meetings.
Yeah,
first
for approval, but.
I mean, but, you know, the main thing is the action items, right? We don't have to capture the last 40 minutes of this discussion with John Sid, because that's, but it, you know, I mean, it could just say 45-minute discussion with John Sid about, and then anybody who's interested can find it in the,
Sure.
in the video.
That's a good point. Yeah, it does get a little easier. It lowers the bar in terms of detail. That's true.
Okay.
The infamous discussion ensued.
Cool.
Anything else, John?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So why don't we go to the executive director's report?
Sure, and we'll try, I understand everybody's, been listening a long time, so I'll be brief, but if Matt, if you could bring up the one thing I wanted to just make sure the board was aware of, and especially, yeah, right there, Scott, you brought up several months ago your concern about cybersecurity, and we did take out some extra insurance at your suggestion and plus at our insurer's suggestion. Wanted to also just let everyone know that our tech support, our IT tech support, who we've worked with for quite a long time, I'm gonna say we've been with them for 10 years. Since 2021, we've been paying $394 a month for their service. And they let us know that their future monthly cost is going up to $930 a month. They are not offering any other level of service except that $930 a month. But our Andrew Trevisani, who was our contact there, just said that the cyber attacks and ransomware is getting very bad. And they don't want to have any clients at this point who are not at the higher level, because if something happens, TechNet does not want to look bad, quote unquote, because somebody who was at a lower level of service had an incident. So he feels really strongly that this is becoming more and more of an issue. He said every year your insurance is gonna start asking more and more questions, longer questions about things which they were actually helping us get this insurance in place. So I want to put it to the board, you know, if the board is comfortable, we'd like to stay with TechNet and use this. You know, just go up to this level. It seems the right thing to do. If you don't like that, we can explore others. But we felt pretty comfortable as staff that Andrew is very straight with us and this is kind of the way it is.
We don't have anything more, but I'm certainly
Right.
comfortable.
It's not a vote,
Yeah.
so again, it's up for discussion. We still have our 394 price, I believe, for at least another month. So
My question would be purchasing policy wise, because we're now going to be exceeding, and I can't remember what it's at. Exceeding the $10,000.
professional services. Okay, good point.
And so that would be my only concern, not to say that we would switch off of them, but can we just keep them, or are we required under our purchasing policy to go out there?
The only thing you might maybe increase the professional service policy just to deal with the inflation since we have never changed it since 2014. So it could be increased and then you'd be within it.
What was it at for 14?
It's been $10,000 a year since 2014.
10,000, under 10, you can
Correct.
decide, over 10, the board has. to
Correct.
decide.
Or RFP, right? Ben?
Yes.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
professional service.
Right.
So
Right.
we could
For an
increase that to
individual.
20,
Yep.
but that would work.
Yeah, so my question would be, what have, with Karen and Jeremy, Catherine, what have you folks been seeing on other boards too? Just generally speaking, for professional services, the ability to go out 10 grand, 15, 20.
I don't know.
I can ask at our board meeting next week too, about other land banks.
Because that's, I remember 10,000, it's been 10,000, I could say it's been 10,000 as the standard for decades.
Can't do much with 10,000.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't do.
So that's why I'm like, yeah, but what should it be? So I think you're smart, Jocelyn, in saying, you know, increasing the policy, but what should it be?
I can try and get some data next week too.
And in terms of that particular cost, that seems totally reasonable to me.
Oh, it does. It's like just right above that 10,000 figure that it just triggered like, hey, you have to go out.
Okay, and what's next? I do have, with regard to ARPA, I know we have a big county meeting tomorrow, at 10 a.m. So, yep, thank you, Jeremy. So look forward to that and getting a lot of things addressed, and then our tour next Friday as well. So please show up. We have City of Buffalo, we have 12 of our 47 sites are under construction now. 8 in Black Rock, I believe 4 in Ken Bailey are under construction, and then we just started doing, BCC just started doing site work clearance and, in the first ward, which is great. And in Cheektowaga, John, all 5 homes.
All
under
5 homes are
construction.
framed up, roof. One of them is drywalled, 2 more will be drywalled by the end of, probably 2 weeks.
I think we have.
And, we're still well on schedule to finish all of them by
Sorry.
October.
Great, may I just go back one, thank you. So these are our City of Buffalo stick built, all of the stick built are the one style, which is really nice, the Albright style, so that's an example of a couple, in the Black Rock neighborhood, and I believe next week some of these will already be sided. Perhaps drywall and, as well, so they're really moving along, they look really good.
That's just mirror image floor plan.
Yep, we have mirrors in some cases, yep. And that next one there, that's your,
This one's 195 North Crest in Cheektowaga. This one's garage, house, roofed, and it's, drywalled inside.
and then the next one, the porch looks really nice. So that's another cheap
This
one.
is 257 Chap.
Yeah, and that's located on a corner, so the porch is actually a really nice feature. So I believe, you know, that'll look good, and they look even better. And I think you'll really, if we walk around next Friday, it's really nice to be able to just walk and see how these, you know, how these are impacting small neighborhoods. It looks great, look really good.
No sandals or anything.
Yeah, everybody wear the proper footwear.
Construction site.
No construction. Rocks.
Absolutely. Matt, anything else? I just went through, yeah. Oh, and Adams Street, really moving along, and John can also speak a little bit. These are some marketing materials that we, our architect put together for our realtor. They're already actively marketing the properties, so that's one of our ranch homes. These are our two-story homes, that are, and then I think we have some reality pictures also after this. So John, just,
This is one of our 2 stories. The one on the right is one of our ranches going up. At this point, our plan was 12 homes. We have 10 homes framed up. 9 of them are roofed. 4 of them are hooked up to public electric. 3 of them are sided and drywalled. We should be starting with sewer and water within the next couple of weeks, hooking them up. We're expecting to have 3 of them, the first 3 at the up north end of the corner, 590, 578, 572. Those 2 are 572 and 578. We're hoping to have them up and ready to be sold within about 60 days.
so our first 2 completed are gonna be, the first ranch and the first double are gonna be models, so for marketing purposes. So then we can, allow people to walk through, decide which they prefer, whether it's a ranch or a 2-story, and then they can get themselves, into the lottery. So we have all kinds of detail about lottery, but we know you've been here a long time. So we're ready if you have questions, but we don't necessarily need to talk about that. And then just real quickly, our other source of funding, our land bank money, we're getting ready to list 2 more Buffalo properties, quite nice properties at 702 Norfolk. That'll be listed, tomorrow, Friday. And then we have a beautiful historic property at 236 Brunswick in Hamlin Park, and another at 149 Northland. That'll be listed shortly. So those are on the move, and then we have got some new funding that we're getting ready to do some new houses on some vacant lots that are already in our inventory. So,
think as it relates to the lottery, if you have
yeah, we have a,
good.
you want to bring up that slide? Yeah, we have a lottery slide, and we're also gonna talk about it tomorrow, at our county meeting for the purposes of, are we going to do a lottery for,
Marketing.
our houses as well? Yeah, I actually, I don't know if you want me to go.
No, I think just as long as the material, you
Yeah.
can get a copy of it.
Yeah, yeah.
take a look at it.
No problem, no problem. And we'll be again, talking about all this tomorrow at 10, with the county too.
Yep.
That's it. All right, yeah. Thank you, thanks for that. I know it was a lot.
There's no motion to adjourn, so we just get out. Bye, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yep, thank you.
Sure.
It'll be on.
And then we'll make sure we're looking for a budget manager on it. Yep, we'll go through what to expect, what we're required.
Want to do it as count.
Last person talk about.
So, okay. So, good, no worries, good.
My team down, yes.
Yeah.
Thank
thanks a
you
lot.
very much.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Right, yeah. Ken asked about like.
Probably